The Holy Family went to Bethlehem. The child Jesus was born there. And before the three wise men attend, about a year after Jesus is born, and therefore before the Holy Family flees into Egypt, as Joseph is told in a dream by the angel that they must do to escape Herod, the child Jesus, according to Jewish law, must be circumcised. And so he's taken to the temple while the Holy Family is still residing in Bethlehem. And so I'm going to read for you now chapter 32 of the first volume of the 1986 edition of the Poem of the Man God, now known as The Gospel as Revealed to Me, entitled Presentation of Jesus in the Temple, given to Maria Valtorta on the 1st of February 1944. I see a couple of people departing from a very modest house. A very young mother comes down an outside staircase, holding in her arms a child enveloped in a white cloth. I recognize our mother. She is always the same, pale and blonde, agile and so kind in her behaviour. She is dressed in white, with a pale blue mantle and a white veil on her head. She is carrying her child so carefully. Joseph is waiting for her at the foot of the steps with a little grey donkey. Joseph is dressed entirely in light brown, both his tunic and his mantle being the same colour. He looks at Mary and smiles at her. When Mary arrives near the little donkey, Joseph places the animal's bridle on his left arm. He takes for a moment the child, who is sleeping peacefully, and thus allows Mary to sit more comfortably on the donkey's saddle. He then hands Jesus back to her, and they set out. Joseph is walking beside Mary, holding the bridle all the time, and ensuring that the donkey goes straight on without stumbling. Mary is holding Jesus in her lap, and lest he might feel cold, she spreads the edge of her mantle over him. Joseph and Mary speak very little, but they often smile at each other. The road, which is not a model road, winds along a country made barren by the season of the year. Only a few other travellers meet them on the road or overtake them. Then I see some houses and the walls around a town. They go in through a gate and start walking on the pavement, which is all broken up and very irregular. Progress is now much more difficult, both because the traffic causes the donkey to stop every moment, and because the holes where stones are missing make the poor animal jerk continuously, and thus Mary and the child are also disturbed. The road is not flat. It is uphill, although but slightly. It is a narrow road running between high houses with small, narrow, low doors, and only a few windows on the road. High above, the sky can be seen peeping with many thin blue strips between the houses, nay, between the terraces. Down in the street, there are many people and much shouting. They meet other people on foot, or riding donkeys, or leading loaded donkeys, and a crowd following a cumbersome camel caravan. At a certain moment, a patrol of Roman legionaries passes by with a great noise of hooves and arms, and they disappear beyond an arch built across a narrow stony road. Joseph turns left along a wider and more pleasant road. I can see the embattled town walls, with which I am already familiar, at the end of the street. Mary dismounts from the little donkey near a gate where there is a kind of stall for other donkeys. I say stall because it is a kind of shed, or better still, a kind of shed spread with straw. There are also some poles with rings to which the animals are tied. Joseph gives some coins to a little man who has gone up to him, and with them he buys some hay, and he draws a pail of water from a rustic well in the corner. He then feeds the donkey. He joins Mary, and they both enter the enclosure of the temple. At first, they turn their steps towards an arcade where the merchants are, to whom Jesus later will give a good lashing. The vendors of lambs and doves and the money changers. Joseph buys 2 little white pigeons. He does not change any money. He obviously has what is required. They then make for a side door with 8 steps, as all the doors seem to have, because the centre of the temple is raised above the surrounding ground. The door opens into a great hall, like the doors of our houses in towns, to give you an idea. Only this one is larger and more ornate. In the hall, there are on the right and on the left 2 kinds of altars, that is, 2 rectangular constructions, the purpose of which I do not understand at first. They are like low basins, because the internal part is lower than the external rim, which is a few centimetres higher. A priest approaches them. I do not know whether he was called by Joseph, or whether he did so of his own accord. Mary offers her 2 little pigeons, and since I know their fate, I turn my eyes elsewhere. I watch the decorations of the very heavy portal, of the ceiling, and of the hall. But I get the impression, by a side glance, that the priest sprays Mary with some water. It must be water, because I do not see any stains on her dress. Then Mary, who had given the priest a handful of coins, together with the 2 pigeons, I'd forgotten to mention that, goes into the real temple in the company of the priest. I'm watching everything. It is a most ornate place. Sculptured angels' heads, palms, and decorations adorn the columns, the walls, and the ceiling. Light comes in through strange, long, narrow windows, obviously without panes, built diagonally with regard to the walls. I suppose the idea is to keep the rain out. Just a little pause for a moment. You'll notice the reference to sprinkling Mary with water, and in the Old Testament we have reference to holy water being used. I think it's in Leviticus, but don't hold me to that. And that is, of course, worth a Catholic knowing, because Protestants have long complained that there's this use of this thing called holy water, which is completely outrageous for a Christian. But of course, it's got Old Testament, Hebrew, God-ordained precedent. And in addition, we see here the reference to sculpted angels' heads in the temple. Well, of course, again, Protestants say to us, and Muslims, oh, you can't have images, you can't have sculptures, it's contrary to God's will. Well, actually, of course, we know from the Old Testament that God himself, when he said you shall not have images, he's referring to you shall not worship images. But we know that God permits nonetheless the creation of images, for it was he who in Numbers ordained the creation of the bronze serpent, upon which the Hebrews were to look to cure them of their diseases. And then when God is designing the temple, telling David and Solomon of his design that they are to carry out, there's lots of reference to living beings. There's the bulls which uphold the great circular basin, and then there's the images on the walls. So it is false to say that we should not have images, of course. Protestants and Muslims are utterly hypocritical because they watch the cinema and the television, which involves a succession of rapid images and a rapid succession of images which therefore appears to be moving. And also they have photographs of people, which are, again, images. So we Catholics and Orthodox need not trouble ourselves about that. And of course, the Orthodox need not trouble themselves, though they did once in the great period of iconoclasm in the 8th century, from which they were saved by the Catholic Church, the Pope especially, when the Second Council of Nicaea was called in 787 AD by the Empress Irene of Byzantium, who called upon the Pope for assistance in this matter, for though they, the Eastern Orthodox, have oftentimes slipped into heresy corporately, not just as individuals, but corporately into heresy, they've always looked to the Catholic Church, the papacy, which they in the first 1,000 years always saw as the rock of orthodoxy to get them out of trouble. But I'm digressing slightly.